thinking about it in terms of connectivity, interconnectivity, and what that means to us as humans. So, as I said, we're creating these islands of habitat, these shrinking, smaller natural areas surrounded by this urban environment. And I like to use these quotes from a couple from Doug Tallamy. If you're not familiar with Doug Tallamy, definitely check him out. He is a bit of a guru in our world, but he's done a lot of research on the importance of using native plants in our landscapes and documenting just how many species rely on our native plants for nectar and pollen, for attracting insects that then become food for many of our bird species and other wildlife. He's done an incredible job and has a few books out there, so Google him if you don't know him. But this quote in particular is really important to this idea of what Florida is dealing with. All of that biodiversity that makes us so unique and that is so important to us cannot be sustained by these tiny little islands that we now have in habitat. They're too small, they're too isolated to actually provide what we need. And so what we can do is use our urban landscapes to help fill that void, to help bridge that gap between those islands of natural areas so that wildlife, pollinators, all of the creatures that we need that are part of that intricate ecosystem can find what they need passing between those islands or in those urban areas where they may find themselves. We can build habitat in our backyards, in our municipal areas, in our city parks, county parks, and help restore what has been taken away. So again, Doug Tallamy, yes, I'm a fan. But he said we need to raise the bar for what our landscapes do. We put so much energy into our yards, especially if we have Augustine grass or any other turf grass. We put so much energy into that, right? But what does it give back to us? We spend time fertilizing and mowing and herbiciding to make sure that our turf grass and our ornamental non-native plants look good. But what is that giving back? It's not giving a whole lot back to us. Maybe you drive by or you're pulling your driveway and you go, oh, my yard looks nice today. Maybe that's what you're getting out of it. It's not giving anything back to the natural world ecologically. Turf grass in particular is basically a dead zone, ecologically speaking. So in order to do this, what Doug Tallamy suggests and what we suggest to raise that bar, to say to your landscape, work for me, work for the natural world, do something. It's very simple. We just need to reduce the amount of turf grass. Again, what is it providing? A lot of heartache, a lot of time in the heat, not giving much back. So reduce it, eliminate it if you can, but that's not always possible, but you can reduce it and incorporate native plants in its place. So reducing the amount of turf grass and the amount of non-native species that we have in our landscapes and incorporating more natives. It's really that simple. We can transition from those commonly used non-native ornamentals that, again, have little ecological value. And that's not to say that every non-native plant offers absolutely nothing. That's not entirely true, but our native plants are much more acclimated to our native wildlife. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. And worse, many of those non-native ornamental species are actually invasives. And you may not realize it, or maybe you do, you're native plant people. But a lot of the plants that you see in common landscapes, especially in new developments, plants that you can go to your big box garden centers and purchase are actually invasive species. There's no law prohibiting the sale of these plants unless they make it to the noxious weed list, which is a whole lot of congressional acts to make that happen. Most of our invasive species are not on that list. So we know that they're problematic, but you can still go down the street and purchase them. And there's nothing on that plant when you walk into a big box garden center that says, hey, butterflies like it, but it's also invasive. You might not want to buy that. And so just to clarify, an invasive species is a plant that is not native to this state or to this area that has displaced or hybridized with our native species. It has altered the community structure or just otherwise caused ecological damage. And so these plants that you see here, you see lantana in the upper left corner. You'll find this in our natural areas, not because it's supposed to be there, but because it escaped cultivation and is out there displacing our native plants. And they're invasive for a reason. They're pioneer species. They don't have a lot of competition. They're easily established, and then they take over. So lots of reasons why you want to avoid them. The Mexican Petunia and the fountain grass that you see on the right are very commonly used in new developments because they're no-brainer plants in the sense that you put them in the ground and you don't have to do anything to them. And that's what a lot of new developments are looking for, these plants that are easy to grow. But easy to grow isn't the only thing we need to be thinking about. There are lots of native species that are just as easy to grow that also provide resources for our native wildlife and are not invasive. So, yes, invasive. I don't have a slide there. The Florida Invasive Species Council is where you want to go. I think I have a slide later with their web address in it, but you can get a list of all of the species that are deemed invasive. Know before you go, know before you buy. You don't want to buy these plants and bring them home. Yes, they are pretty, but plants need to be more than just pretty. They should play a role in your landscape's ecosystem. And yeah, your landscape can be an ecosystem. It should be an ecosystem. It should be a habitat for the wildlife that are found here locally. So let's invite them, right? And if we do this, if we plant the plants that they need with the intention of creating habitat, not just beautifying our landscapes, we're going to bring in those pollinators and those other creatures, those native creatures, but we're also going to show other people the benefits of it, right? We can encourage our neighbors when they see the life that's brimming in our landscapes because we put these native plants in. We're attracting butterflies and bees, other beneficial insects, birds, snakes. Yes, snakes, they're good. They really are. We're encouraging our neighbors to do the same. And that's when that corridor possibility comes into play. If I do it and my neighbor likes it and they do it, and then their neighbor sees it and goes, I want to do that too. And we can build this momentum. We're literally creating corridors or pathways of habitat. And that's what we want to do. We want to restore and mitigate all the damage that we have done by developing our natural world. So Florida native plants in particular are all of these things. They have evolved here for millennia along with our native pollinators and other wildlife. So they have the ability to provide the resources that our pollinators need. Yes, they can get some resources from our agricultural crops, from some of our non-native species, but not as effectively as they can from the plants that they have evolved with. They're also adapted to our crazy climate conditions and our harsh weather. We have hurricanes, we have drought, we have, high heat. We have lots of different things here in Florida that our plants are acclimated to that a lot of these plants that we bring in from other parts of the world are not adapted to. That's why they require so much water, so much care, fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, because they're not from here and they haven't evolved over millennia with those species. So our native plants, when we use native plants, we're not only providing that habitat, but we're reducing our need for excessive watering, for fertilizers, herbicides, all those chemicals that are also wreaking havoc on our environment. And our native plants provide ecosystem services. They can enrich our soil so that we can establish more plants in the otherwise barren habitat. They can help with erosion control, water quality, all those things that we need as humans and that our ecosystems need too. And they're beautiful. And I'm going to show you some beautiful new plants. So good habitat means diversity. I am going to talk a lot about wildflowers because that's what we do. We are the Wildflower Foundation. But as I said, when you're talking about habitat, unless you're creating a meadow, and even meadows have grasses as well as wildflowers, unless that's what you're creating or trying to recreate, you really want to think about all the different structures and strata of native plants. You want to make sure that you have a very diverse landscape. And so to do that, you want to include a variety of habits or plant types. Wildflowers are excellent. They are beautiful showstoppers. They are the thing, the centerpiece to your landscape. They can really make those passersby stop and go, what's that beautiful yellow flower blooming? They're also going to be attracted to pollinators and birds as well, who are either seed eaters or who are eating the insects that are attracted to your wildflowers. In addition, it's good to have grasses. Grasses are really nice aesthetically because they add movement to the landscape. If you've ever seen a muley grass, and I'll show you that in a bit, but you know, a couple of muley grasses in the fall when they're in bloom and the wind is blowing through, they just have this texture that is really striking in a landscape, but they're also good plants for wildlife. Vines are really nice to add vertical interest to your landscape. They're also good when you don't have a lot of space. So, you know, if you can't plant out, you can plant up. And a lot of vines are also really good for providing food and cover for many of our native wildlife. And of course, trees and shrubs are inherent to the landscape. Again, unless you are planting a meadow or something a little bit more specific, a general diverse landscape needs trees and shrubs. We need places for our birds and other wildlife to seek shelter, to find nesting material, host plants as well. Many of our trees and shrubs act as host plants. They're just really important. They can also act as centerpieces to your landscape and provide, you know, planted together to provide a privacy screen. A lot of our native shrubs can be pruned and cut into shapes, just like our podocarpus and all those other non-native plants that are so commonly used as a hedge, but we have natives that can do just that. So again, diversity. Think about all the different plant types and the things that you're trying to attract. It's really important to understand what wildlife is native to the part of the state that you live in or to the neighboring ecosystems if you happen to live near a natural area. Then to understand what kinds of things you want to bring into your own home landscape. You also want to make sure that you're looking at bloom times. So plant different species that bloom throughout the year. If you have flowers blooming spring, summer, and fall, you're going to be able to feed our pollinators and many of our birds too throughout those seasons. You also want to look at host and nectar plants. It's great to have a host plant, but if you don't have a nectar plant, those butterflies, once they emerge, are not going to have that food source that they need. You need to think about companion planting. And we have a lot of resources on our website to help you with this. I know I'm giving you a lot of information. It sounds like a really detailed how-to, but we have a lot of resources that will help you with that plant selection and picking plants that go together and that serve these functions. A lot of it too is just, you know, what aesthetically do you like? Look for the things that make you happy, understand what those plants attract or provide resources for, and then you can balance that out in your landscape. Just like you want flowers all over the year, you also want fruit or seed production. So understanding the plant's life cycle, when they bloom, when they produce seed, when they produce fruit, is good to understand so that you can again have something happening all year round. And then we also want plants for foliage. So grasses are good for nesting material for many of our bird species. Shrubs and trees that have dense foliage are good places for our birds to hide and other wildlife, places to seek cover and shelter when they need to. And then if you have the ability to add other resources, other man-made perhaps resources like a birdhouse or a bee condo, these are always nice to just supplement your landscape and provide that additional resource. Even a brush pile. We just bought our house in 2018 and we redid the landscape. Thank you, COVID. One silver lining of COVID was I had all this time and nothing to do. And we did our entire landscape in natives. And we just started a brush pile by this oak tree that was already in there. And I've seen so much life just in this pile of sticks. So every time our oak tree drops a few little twigs, we just toss it over there. But I've seen black racers, lots of different lizards live in there, and even birds we've seen the thrashers have ducked in behind it. It's really amazing what a pile of sticks can do. But that is an important and an easy thing that you can add to your landscape as well. It's also really important to choose the right plant for the right place. Understand what your landscape is like. Do you have dry, sandy soils, or is it mostly moist to wet? Different plants like different soil conditions. If you're going to put in a wetland plant, you better have a bog garden or a very moist soil consistently. Otherwise, it's going to perish. It's not going to do well in your former sandhill or scrub landscape. So understand what your landscape is before you choose those plants. And look too at the sun conditions. Do you have full sun, full shade, something in between? We have plants that like all of those conditions, but picking the right one is going to ensure, or at least help guarantee success. If you're just choosing plants based on, I like this one, I want it in my yard, that may not give you, it's not going to necessarily succeed. And that's the one thing we don't want. We want you to go buy these plants, put them in your landscape and have success. Because if you don't have success, then you're going to get discouraged. And, we don't want that. We want you just, if you have an understanding of what the conditions are, it's going to help make sure that those plants survive. Also looking at the hardiness zone of the plant. You guys are in, what are you in? 10A here? 10, yeah, well, it's probably shifting right now too, thanks to climate change. But understanding the hardiness zone of the plant is also important. There are natural ranges to our plants, and then the hardiness zones tend to be a little bit broader. But if you're purchasing a plant that only grows naturally in the upper reaches of the panhandle, and you're in a South Florida hardiness zone, it's probably not going to do very well. You want to make sure that it's a plant that can actually thrive in zone 10A where you're located. And then also make sure you know where your plants are coming from. Excuse me. You want to make sure that you know the plant's origins. So, I don't know. Some of the species that are native to Florida are native to other parts of the country. Just because it's a Florida native doesn't mean it doesn't grow anywhere else. And so a lot of the big box garden centers that are selling native species are actually buying from large growers that are coming from places like Colorado. If you think about Colorado, what is that landscape like? It's not Florida, right? High altitude, colder temperatures, very different soil composition. So if you're growing butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, which is hot right now, everybody wants to do something for the monarchs. But if you're buying a specimen that was grown in Colorado and you try to plant it in your Florida landscape, it's probably not going to do that well. It's really important to buy from nurseries that are growing the plants themselves, that can speak to the origin of the seed stock, that are using Florida seed stock. And they can also speak to what's been done to the plant. Some of the species or some of the plants that you can buy at your big box garden, and I'm not here to disparage the big box garden centers. It's just that you don't know what you're getting when you go in there. You do know what you're getting when you're dealing with the local nursery. But a lot of those plants have been treated with chemicals, systemic insecticides in some cases. So you're going into these locations to purchase plants to feed the butterflies, trying to do the right thing. And what you don't know or may not know is that that plant has a chemical within it that's designed to ward off the species. When you go to a garden center, they want those plants looking beautiful and flowering, and you want to see it and go, oh my gosh, I want to take that home. But if it's a larval host plant, they're trying to show you what the plant can look like when it's not being eaten. So they're putting those chemicals in to ward off it being eaten. Sorry, it's not a very eloquent way to say it. But the point is, you'll get that plant, you'll take it home, you'll plant it, butterflies will come, they'll lay their eggs, the caterpillars will come out and eat it, and they will perish because the chemical inside is designed to do that. It's designed to protect the plant and make it look good for you as the consumer, but it's really detrimental ecologically. If you're shopping at native nurseries, you don't have to worry about that. You can ask these questions and somebody knowledgeable will be able to speak to that, which is not going to happen most of the time in the big box stores. So all of that to say, visit plantrealflorida.org to find a native nursery in your area. Wilcox is right down the road. Excellent, excellent nursery with very knowledgeable staff. They're not gonna sell you a plant that you're gonna take home and it's gonna kill the butterflies. So, but definitely know where your plants are coming from. If you want to start from seed, the Florida Wildflower Seed Growers Cooperative is a good place to get native Florida seed as well. And of course, Native Plant Society and chocolate plant sales are always good options too. And finally, as I mentioned, make sure you're avoiding those invasive species. And this is the Florida Invasive Species Council that maintains the list of invasive species every 2 years. They update that list, so you can go to their website and actually see the list of species. Take that with you if you are going to a big box store to make sure that you're not buying the bad plants. So all of that, and now for the fun stuff, right? I'm going to talk to you about some of the plants that are really easy to grow, that are generally available at your native nurseries, and that provide really excellent resources for wildlife. This is Florida Green Eyes. This is probably one of my favorite wildflowers because it has a secret. When it's in full bloom and its little anthers and filaments are all popping up and turning nice and maroon, it gives off a very subtle chocolate scent. You have to stick your nose in there to get it, but it is well worth bending over for this little 12-inch wildflower. It's really amazing. It's a very drought tolerant plant. Once it's established, it creates this nice big tuberous root that makes it very, very drought tolerant. It likes full sun, dry sandy soil, but very, very easy to establish. And it's a prolific seeder, which many of these plants are that I'll be talking about. So it is a perennial. It doesn't tend to die back, but it does produce a lot of seeds, so you'll get a lot more plants from it. This is partridge pea. This is an annual, although sometimes it can be a short-lived perennial. It is a member of the pea family, so it is a nitrogen fixer, so it puts nutrients back into the soil, and it might make it so that you can add other plants to an area that otherwise might not tolerate a whole lot. But it does well in dry sandy soils, full sun to partial shade. It's got this really cool flower on it, pea flower, very typical pea flower, but it's just very beautiful with a nice little red center. Fern-like leaves, red stems as the plant gets a little bit older. So it's something unique to look at in the landscape. It attracts a lot of pollinators, but it's pollinated primarily by long-tongued bees. And it has these little nectar glands at the base of the leaf stalks that attract ants and other small insects that then attract birds who are looking for those insects. The birds also like the seeds. And even though it is an annual and you'll lose it after a year, it's a prolific seeder. If you have one of these, you'll have lots of these, whether you want them or not. This is twin flower. There are a couple species of twin flower. This is oblongifolia, oblong leaf twin flower. There's also a swamp twin flower that looks very similar but has smaller leaves and smaller flowers. They are both excellent ground cover options. They spread by underground rhizomes and by self-seeding. So they fill in nicely. They can tolerate dry to moist soils, full sun to partial shade, although in the sun they do tend to get a little bit fuller. You get a little lighter in the shade, but not too much. It's very tolerant of that. This is a host plant for the malachite, white peacock, and common buckeye. Are they common buckeye? What's that? Banner crescent, yeah. So quite a few butterflies post on this plant. But this is a great one for ground cover because it fills in nicely. You can actually mow it to about 6 inches and it'll come back. If you need to do that, or if you're trying to slowly turn your lawn into a native lawn, this is a nice one to get started. Scarlet Hibiscus is another one of my favorites, or all my favorites, but this is quite stunning. It's one of our largest wildflowers. The bloom, when it's in full bloom, is bigger than my hand. It's absolutely stunning. This is a wet-loving plant, though. You cannot plant this in a dry landscape. But if you have a container that does not have drain holes, you can keep it moist. It does well. You can also sink that container into a water feature or a pond. As long as it is continuously moist, it will do well. It is a summer bloomer, so not especially long bloom time, but during the summer, it does tend to produce a lot of flowers. They close up at the end of the day, but there's usually lots more blooms behind them. And it's just absolutely stunning. A great one for attracting hummingbirds, butterflies, other pollinators love it too. This is blazing star. We have 4 species of blazing star that are generally available from our native nurseries. And they run the gamut from dry soils to moist soils. And they can be anywhere from 2 to 4. I've seen them up to 6 feet tall as well. They're excellent nectar plants. Butterflies, moths, bees, other insects really like them. Even the occasional hummingbird has been, I haven't personally witnessed this, but I do know that hummingbirds have been documented to use these. This is just a beautiful, nice tall flower. It doesn't require a lot of horizontal space. So if you do have a small garden, even though it gets nice and tall, it's still suitable for that small space because it doesn't spread out horizontally. And it has this lovely purple flower, purple fall flower that is just really, really quite lovely. And again, excellent pollinator plant. Dotted horseman is probably your best, I like to call it the best bang for your buck pollinator plant because it attracts such an incredible diversity. I have seen, especially wasps, I know wasps, but they're really great pollinators. They're an important part of our ecosystem too. But I've seen some crazy, crazy bugs on this plant. This is a member of the mint family, and it actually contains thymol, the chemical that's also found in thyme, the herb that you are probably familiar with cooking. So it has a very similar scent, like kind of a cross between oregano and thyme. It's not particularly minty, but it's very odoriferous. It's really nice in the landscape for that purpose. It also is edible. You can take those flower stalks and dry them, make a tea out of it, and it has a very mild sedative property. You think like chamomile tea light. Not going to knock you out, but it's a nice kind of savory mint flavor. You can use it as a flat herb as well. But again, excellent plant for pollinators. It does spread quite a bit on its own, so it is one to keep an eye on. If you try to put it in a small space, it might try to take over. But you can, keep an eye on it, weed it out, or even cut it back before it sets seeds. I don't like to say that because I like to let all the plants do what they're naturally supposed to do. But if you are trying to keep it in a smaller space, it is something to consider. This is frogfruit, another excellent ground cover plant. And this, if you have St. Augustine grass, you probably have this too. I remember this as a kid, picking these tiny little bouquets of flowers in our St. Augustine lawn. It likes moist soils. It likes the same conditions that your St. Augustine grass likes. But this is a really great alternative for that. Another one that you can kind of plant intermingling with your St. Augustine if you're trying to take that out. St. Augustine has its own level of competition, so it's I advise just removing it if you can. But this is a really good one because it also spreads by underground runners. It forms these nice dense mats of evergreen foliage. Another one that you can mow. Again, we don't recommend going below 6 inches. You don't want to scalp the plant, but you can cut it back and it will come back. It can bloom throughout the year, so you have these lovely little matchstick looking or match head looking flowers. This is also a larval host for the white peacock, fan crescent, maybe the common buckeye too. I have a hard time remembering the different larval hosts, but and you can also put this in a hanging basket. The twin flower too, I should have mentioned, is another one that you can put in a hanging basket. So again, if you don't have a huge yard to turn up and create this massive habitat, you can still put in a container garden or some hanging pots. The addition of native plants into your landscape is important on whatever level you can do it. So knowing that some of these really work nicely in a container or a hanging basket is also, a good alternative. This is wild pennyroyal. And if I need to if you need to like pull the cane out, let me know. I do have a few more plants, but this is the part I like the best. So this is wild pennyroyal, which is, and I should say too, all the plants that I'm featuring are suitable for this hardiness zone. I did cut out the too far north and the too far south species. Wild pennyroyal is another member of a mint family. It's a low growing, usually it gets a little woody, so it's technically a wildflower, but also kind of has a shrubby habit to it. It can be made into a tea, just like that dotted horse mint. It tends to have more of a sweeter lemony mint flavor to it, and the leaves are much smaller, needle-like. But this is a good one for providing nectar in winter months. It tends to bloom in the winter. So a time when a lot of our plants are not providing resources. Remember, thinking about seasonal planting and having resources throughout the year, this is a good option for providing something during those winter months. Naturally, this is a scrub plant, so it likes it very dry, very sandy soils. It prefers full sun, so don't put this in your moist oak hammock habitat. But if you have that dry, full sun option, this is a good alternative. Wild Petunia is another good ground cover, another one that you can mow if you need to. This one spreads pretty prolifically by its own seed. And it's really cool because it projectiles its seed. So I've only heard this once, but I swear it's a true story. If you happen to be by the plant at the very right moment when it's sending it, you do hear a little pop, and it's really cool when that happens. One time only. I don't think it's ever going to happen to me again. This is another larval host plant. Has a long bloom period, typically spring through fall. The flowers do close up at the end of the day, but again, this one has a lot of blooms coming up, so it tends to have, it tends to look fresh all the time. It can tolerate full sun to full shade, but in the shade, it does get leggier and you'll have less bloom. So it likes a little, it does best in a mix of sun and shade. You're going to get a little bit denser foliage and definitely more flowers. These are a couple of the salvias that are often available. On the left is lyre leaf sage. This is another one that typically blooms in winter, although I had some blooming today in a planting that we were working on. But it is generally a winter bloomer. So again, resources at a time when other things aren't available. This is a lower growing one. It gets knocked back the rest of the year to this lovely little Basil Rosette that has some purple in it. It's really just beautiful, even when it's not in bloom. And then on the right is tropical sage, Salvia coccinea. This is another one that if you have one, you'll have lots. I have a few in my back area. I have this pavered area. I don't know why the former owners pavered the entire backyard, but I have Salvia coccinea coming up everywhere. And I just pull them up, pot them, and give them to people. It's a great starter plant to get people interested in natives. It's an easy one because, like I said, you have 1 year lots. And it's a good one for attracting butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love that red tubular flower. So any of those you can add to your landscape are going to hopefully attract those pollinators or those hummingbirds. And it does well in just about any condition. It's typically dry and moist soils. It can handle sun to shade. It's really not very picky. We have quite a few goldenrods too that are available. This is our largest one, Seaside Golden Rod. It can get up to about 6 feet tall, and it does spread by underground rhizomes as well. So it's one that you want to give space to. But I have a little bed along my driveway that's blocked off by just some little pylons, and that keeps it contained pretty well. So even though it's spreading to fill it in, it's not thing. You can't keep it under control. This is another great one for pollinators. As you see, there's, I think, 5 different bees and wasps on that picture alone. But it's an excellent plant, beautiful golden blooms. It attracts a lot of insects, but then it also attracts a lot of birds that are insect eaters and seed eaters as well. This also gets a bad rap because a lot of people think they're allergic to goldenrod, but it actually blooms at the same time and is found in the same habitat as ragweed, which is the true allergen. Ragweed has windborne pollen. This has a sticky pollen that does not get dispersed on the wind. So if you think you're allergic to goldenrod, I encourage you to stick your nose in one blooming and test that out. I mentioned grasses, just to try to speed this up a little bit. Elliot's lovegrass, there's also purple lovegrass that are very similar. Beautiful kind of silvery blue foliage. And then when it's in bloom, you can kind of tell from this photo, it has these lovely wispy seed heads that are, again, good sources of food for small wildlife and birds, but just really striking in the landscape. This is kind of another one of those no-brainer plants. You can plant it in dry, moist to almost wet soils. It does well in the sun to shade. It doesn't really require a lot, but it is a really nice bunch grass that is evergreen. So even when it's not in bloom, it's really nice. I mentioned muley grass earlier too. This is another evergreen bunch grass that very forgiving, can do well in a lot of different conditions. It has these nice dark needle-like leaves. So again, interesting aesthetic, even when it's not in bloom. But of course, once it puts on its lovely fall display, it's just absolutely stunning, especially when the wind moves through. It's just like a purple haze on the landscape. Coral bean, I have a couple shrubs and trees I want to just mention. I mentioned earlier the red tubular flowers that are attractive to hummingbirds. This is a great plant for attracting them. It is armed, so the leaves have these tiny little prickles on them, and the plant itself also has some thorny-like prickles. So it is one that you want to be careful with when you're handling it. But it's a nice one to plant in an area that you want to discourage traffic, foot traffic, because nobody wants to tangle with a thorny bush. But these beautiful wands of red tubular flowers are absolutely striking in the landscape. The leaves are this fun little deltoid shape. So again, a nice interest in your yard. It can be evergreen and deciduous. I have two. My backyard one is evergreen. My front yard one is deciduous. I can't explain it. It's usually a longitudinal thing, but I'm in the same yard, so I don't know. But it's a pretty easy plant to grow. The seeds are toxic though, so keep that in mind if you have small children or pets. You do want to make sure that you either keeping them away from it or that you're harvesting those seeds before they hit the ground. They're big bean pods with very bright, obvious red seeds, so you won't miss them. This is Simpson stopper. If you're familiar with Suriname Cherry, which is a very common hedge plant, that is its invasive cousin. This is the native. It performs just the same. You can plant it in a hedge the same way you would Suriname Cherry. You can prune it. It does really well. It has these cute little white firecracker looking flowers, edible fruits as well that we can eat, as well as birds and other wildlife like. But again, very easy to grow and a good replacement or alternative for that Suriname Cherry, as well as other non-native shrubs. I mentioned too that trees are really important in a landscape, so not just shrubs, but if you have the ability or the space to plant a tree, a pine or an oak are essential. They are centerpieces to our ecology. They're key elements to many of our ecosystems. This is slash pine, which is a really fast-growing pine. It's evergreen. It provides vital food and resources for just about every animal you can think of. Insects utilize it, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, all classes of wildlife utilize these pine trees. And it's a great source of mulch if you have one in your landscape. Pine straw is really good, especially if you have wildflowers or other plants that you want to allow to reseed. It's important that the seed is able to actually touch the soil. So if you have a thick layer of true heavy mulch on your ground, those seeds are never going to make it to the soil. And so all of these prolific seeders that I'm mentioning are ineffective if they can't actually get the soil. So if you have pine straw is kind of like pickup sticks on the ground. It helps keep the weeds down, but it still allows that space for the seeds to hit the soil and reestablish those populations. And oaks too are essential for many, many bird species. There are so many different larval caterpillars and other insects that live on these oak trees that then feed our baby bird population. So an oak is just, if you have the ability or space to put one in, this is sand live oak, which is our smaller live oak. So if you like the aesthetic of a live oak, but you don't have the space for that beautiful lumbering branching tree, this one's going to give you a lot of that similarity. It's not going to look like a, it's not going to be a complete replacement for a live oak, but it does have a lot of these characteristics, and it's a much smaller stature. And of course, the oak acorns are important food source as well. Oak trees too are a really nice mulch source. That's what I have in my yard. I have 2 oak trees, and for months at a time they drop their leaves, but it's a really good ground cover or good mulch alternative because again, it still allows for some of that seed to hit the soil, but it helps keep those weeds down as well. And I think this is my last one, but this is truly my favorite. I know I've said our favorites many times tonight, but I have come to love this plant. I used to hate this in all of my ecology classes. Go out in the field and I was just learning about Florida native plants. More sapwometas everywhere. It is the most ubiquitous plant in Florida, but there's a reason for that. It is incredibly important. Experts have documented over 300 species of wildlife utilizing this plant in its natural habitat. It's also one of the top 3 nectar sources for honeybees. The honeybees are not native, but honey as an agricultural crop is very important in Florida. It's a burgeoning industry, and it's something that is growing. The other 2 sources are citrus, and we know what's happening to our citrus industry here in Florida. And Biden's alba, beggar ticks, Spanish needles, all those common names for that weed. That is a native plant too, and I don't include this because that's not a plant that you go out and buy, but pretty much everyone has it in their landscape. And I do want to encourage you to give space to that one too. But this is our other option. The berries are an important food source for bears. You have bears in your landscape, but for other wildlife too. They're also edible to us. They don't taste particularly good, but you can add some sugar and it helps it a little bit. But the flowers are incredibly sweet. They're these long wands of white flowers. You get a little glimpse of it in the lower left corner. Just absolutely just fills the air with that really nice rich sweetness when they're in bloom. And then we have this evergreen, very interesting foliage. This is pretty low growing. They can get up to about 6 feet, but generally not. They're very slow growing. So if you put them in at a smaller size plant, it's going to take a while before they reach that. They are armed. It's called saw palmetto for a reason. That petiole or that leaf stalk is covered in teeth. But again, it's a nice one to put in an area that you want to discourage foot traffic because again, nobody wants to walk through that. So those are just a few of my favorite native plants. But the idea is that we put these together with the intention of creating habitat. So thinking about those principles that I mentioned earlier, making sure that you're thinking through not just the aesthetics, but the value ecologically, the value to our pollinators and our other wildlife. You really can create what we call, and many others call, real Florida style. You're not going to replicate that New England garden. It's not what we have here. But if we start looking at what our native plants have to offer, and we start reassessing our idea of beauty, because that's part of the issue too, we're used to these very cultivated, manicured landscapes, but that's not necessarily, that doesn't have to be our only option for beauty. You can see here we have a lot of different ways to incorporate native plants in our landscapes that do provide that beautiful aesthetic while also providing value to our wildlife. And like I said, we do have a lot of resources on our website. I did bring the 20 Easy Wildflowers and the Attracting Wildlife series of brochures if you guys want to take any of those home. 20 Easy Wildflowers features 20 different genera of wildflowers. It gives you all the information you need to know about growing them, putting them in your landscape, what to expect, how to purchase them. The other handouts we have, I didn't unfortunately have any to bring with you tonight. Printing is a premium these days, but they are available on our website for free. We have handouts that help you select plants for shady environments, for dry, aquatic, some information on monarchs and milkweeds, talking about the non-native milkweed and the problems with that, and just a variety of other handouts. So you can visit FLA, we should add it to the slide, flawildflowers.org. and download or look at all of these, as well as over 300 plant profiles and so much more information to help you do this in your own landscape. And I do have copies of my book. I wrote this with Nancy Bissett. It features 100 wildflowers, grasses, vines, shrubs, and trees that are readily available in native nurseries. Easy to grow, gives you all the information you need on, again, what to expect, how to maintain them in your landscape, the wildlife that rely on them, and some other fun information too. And as I said before, I swear there's only one more slide. I don't know why I get nervous about that. I can't even see the clock, but I feel like I just run on. Anyway, even if you don't have a huge patch of earth, you can still make an impact. Every little bit helps. Plant a pollinator pot, a container garden. You know, anything you can do is going to provide a small amount of habitat. And certainly if you have the ability to transform your landscape, or even better, if you have large tracts of land and want to restore it, everything is important and helpful to our beleaguered wildlife. And every little bit we can do can help add to that corridor idea, creating those pathways within our urban areas between our shrinking natural areas. So that is all I have. Thank you. The question is, what is the seed source I mentioned? And that is the Florida Wildflower Growers Cooperative. Their website is floridawildflowers.com. And they are a group of farmers that grow wildflower seed. They do sell some non-native because they do supply seed for the Department of Transportation, which is not exclusively native, but they sell a lot of native seed as well. And the idea of the native garden, especially when it's very full of life, can look quote unquote messy to people. And so the question is, how do we, what can we do to address that? And that is a tough one. You know, we're trying to change people's minds about their idea of beauty and not just seeing it for aesthetics, but, you know, to me, the ecology is beauty. But what I personally do is I'm outside a lot. I'm in my front yard a lot, and I'm making eye contact with everyone who's going by. But that's an entry point because people are curious. And I find that by being, we put a little patio out front, so I have a little seating area and everything. It's just a nice place to have a cocktail at the end of the night and keep an eye on my neighbors too, but engaging them and having these conversations, because even the ones that, I mean, I've gotten some comments that are, they're showing interest and then they're snide little something or other that makes you realize they're not that interested, but they want to have the conversation. And, you know, being open to that, being welcoming to people who are passing by and trying to engage them so that they know you're intentionally doing it too. And that's the thing, you know, we're spending a lot of time outside just weeding, or look, my boyfriend started an Instagram for our yard, which I thought was ridiculous, but now I'm like, he's a plant person. I never expected that. But he's often photographing the insects and stuff. And so just being out there gets people interested in, like, what are you doing? We also put a couple of paths. We have a very small yard, I'll be clear about that. But we put some pathways in that we mulch with flora mulch, which is the only mulch you should use if you need mulch. It's made from Melaleuca, which is the invasive tree that is taking over or has taken over the Everglades. Use that and only that. You don't want to use cypress mulch because that's decimating our cypress areas. Anyway, sorry, separate presentation. But we've just created these paths, and we have 2 of them coming right off the street. So it's inviting, it's engaging. People can see with those pathways that, again, there's an intention. And I think when people start to understand that you didn't just let your yard go, that you actually did it for some reason, they may not understand what that reason is, but when they understand that there is an intention, that this was planned, or that you're monitoring and paying attention, I think that helps them get over that hurdle just a little bit, at least in my experience. But this is I don't want to say war. This is a long battle we have to undertake to get people to change their minds, but trying to, you know, having conversations like this where we can talk about the importance of the pollinators and what they mean to us. And I try to even weave those into my conversations with my neighbors. And also too, I mentioned the Salvia coccinea that I have so much growing. I have some violets that are doing the same thing. Any plants that I can just put out on the side. I have a little sign that I made from a leftover political yard sign. I just painted over it and put free wildflowers and drew my best little first grade flower doodles on it. But you know, that's an opportunity for people to kind of make that connection. And if I'm outside when I'm doing that, it's another opportunity to talk to people. And really, I think conversations are the best way. And there's signage, you can get your yard wildlife certified or put, you know, signs up. And sometimes that's something that people will respond to. But honestly, I think it's just talking.